Okay, well, good morning, everyone. As James said, my name is Sam Kelly. I'm the automation specialist. I cover the southwest of the country, and also joining me will be Andy Gilbert, going over some of the demonstrations. He covers the northeast and the north of the country, so my diagonal cross-country counterpart. In this session, we'll be going over what WinCC Unified is, a description of why it has come about. We'll then give a little bit of a platform overview, and then we'll dive into some of the technological features with demonstrations of how you can use these and configure them yourself. So first of all, WinCC Unified was shipped with version 16 of TI Portal. So for those of you with SUS contracts, or for those of you who've already downloaded V16 and installed it, you may already have this on your machine. So WinCC Unified, it's a common visualization runtime, which encompasses both HMI panels and PC-based stations, both of which are configured and programmed with TI Portal. So why have we got this WinCC Unified? Well, the way industry is moving forward, for example, around the increase of production data, the idea of big data in Industry 4.0, we have to develop systems and products which can capture this data, store it, interpret it, and visualize it, which is what WinCC Unified can help with. We also have an increased number of devices with increased interconnectivity between these devices as well. So the days of having a machine with just, for example, one HMI used by an operator are something perhaps of the past. We may have machines with multiple HMIs, PC stations connected, or indeed operators able to look at machine information or diagnostics through devices such as mobile phones or tablets. And also we have in the future as upcoming user interaction scenarios, perhaps around augmented reality. So if you wish to ride the wave of this technological deluge, then you have to master this using web technology, embrace device independency, utilizing things like SVG graphics, cloud connectivity and digitalization, all these types of topics, okay, in order to enable you to the next level of visualization. And for us to enable you to do that, we have developed this new system, this WinCC Unified. So built in, we have native web technology based on, for example, HTML5. We have the ability to use SVG graphics, which we'll demonstrate shortly, and also the ability to program and animate things with JavaScript as well. Previously, this was Visual Basic, but we're now moving over to the more modern JavaScript. Also mentioned device independency. So we're no longer just limited to a HMI panel, but we may wish to use other devices, as already mentioned, like mobile phones or tablets. This also means that we have to have a scalable solution. So we can't just have a platform, an engineering platform for one type of device. We have to be able to accommodate many different types of devices, okay? And also in terms of interconnectivity, we may wish to have on-premise data storage, or we may even have cloud or edge types of applications where we send data, for example, off-site into the cloud. So as already mentioned, we have this one standard or type of engineering solution. So we tick the metaphorical boxes of standardization and scalability by utilizing this common engineering platform. So we have the different types of devices already mentioned. We have the unified comfort panels and the PC stations, both of which can be configured and programmed in this common engineering platform of TI Portal version 16. Okay, so as already mentioned, if you have this V16, you probably already have this on your machines at the moment, so you're ready to get going and try these out after this session. The first innovation that we wish to tell you about with WinCC Unified is the ability to use SVG graphics or scalable vector graphics. So the idea of these is that they are, as the name suggests, vector graphics, which are able to be displayed on different screen sizes at different resolutions without them being distorted or pixelated. Okay, so this fits in with the idea of being able to have visualization on a small device, for example, like a mobile phone, or indeed on a large device, for example, a TV screen within a reception area or perhaps the end of a factory line. We also have the ability to animate or dynamize these SVG graphics. So, for example, in this case, we have a lovely image of a heat exchanger. That flame size could, for example, be animated, linked to an interface tag. So the flame size changes dependent on, for example, the valve position tag, which we may be reading into our HMI system. So as we have in the bottom right, we have a demonstration of this. So if Andy, if you're ready, we can give you a quick demonstration as to what SVG graphics are and also their benefit.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, Sam. Okay, as Sam's already mentioned, Unified Package is actually, it's built around web technologies. So what I've done is I put together a demonstration project for you. Typically, this is the sort of format that you would expect to see Unified in, so we're running inside of a browser. It doesn't necessarily have to run inside of a browser. This could be running in kiosk mode, so you wouldn't see the edges of it being full screen. Now, what I've done as well is, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but just to give you an idea, I'm sort of graphically challenged when it comes to designing things like starter systems. I'm a bit more more to do with form over fashion. So what I've done is, and I'm not going to talk about too much detail because Dave Walker will be discussing this later on in the week, is what we've done is we've used an HMI design template to actually create these screens for me, or the basis of these screens. That's where the sort of colorways and the general screen layouts come from. But back to Unified. So as we've quite rightly pointed out, the reason that we've gone down the route of using scalar vector graphics is because we are working in a browser environment, working with HTML, we're working with JavaScript, and scalar vector graphics lend themselves very, very well, the design around this sort of platform. Now, typically, just so there's no confusion, when we're talking about scalar vector graphics, we're talking about something that we can quite easily and readily scale up. And Sam made a great point. We're not too concerned now about the deployment resolution of the device that we're using. So just to give you an example of that, what we're talking about here is the fact that we can quite readily scroll in, we can zoom right in. What you can see is there is literally no loss of quality. Now, the interesting thing is this particular object, which is one that's been taken straight out of the library, that is a dynamic scalar vector graphic. Now, when people talk about dynamic scalar vector graphics, all we really mean is it is a graphical object that has a user interface, as Sam's already pointed out. So what you'll notice is when you click on the object, for example, that we've taken directly out of the library, you'll notice that unlike a typical graphics object, it has an interface here. And what I've done is, as you can see, is just to keep it really simple, is that we've got a contrast color, which is one of the elements that we can change. And I've associated a tag with it, as Sam's already mentioned, and we've put a range on it. So I have a process tag, which is going to influence the value of this here. So fundamentally, in a normal operation, where if I have a 0 in there, I'll be getting a red color. If I get a 1, then it'll change to green, it'll change the top of this. In operation, what that actually looks like is it looks like this. So just to keep it really strict, really simple, it's a very, very simple demonstration. In fact, it's changing just this element of it. What you will find is that when you start looking into, when we start looking into the libraries inside of here, you'll notice that we have graphics inside of here, and we have these in SVG format. What you will notice is down here, they call them inside of TIA Portal, not dynamic scalar vector graphics, but dynamic widgets. And typically, as we've already mentioned, if you look into here, you'll see there's our boiler that we talked about earlier on. And again, as we discussed, you'll find that has an interface with it. And there, as Sam said, you can adjust the flame size accordingly. So I could actually tag it up and just have this moving in real time. So that's basically where we are in terms of scalar vector graphics. So I'll hand back to Sam now.
That's great. Thank you, Andy.
No problem.
Okay, so the next technological innovation is regarding what we call screen windows. So the idea of a screen window is a little bit different to what you may be used to, for example, on a traditional comfort panel where you navigate away from a screen and you open up a brand new screen and there's perhaps nothing behind it. With the screen windows, we can have this what we call a screen in screen operation. So you may have, for example, an overall home page, and within that home page you may have different elements looking at different parts of the machine, or perhaps different functions, for example trend view, alarms, and this type of thing. Each of those kind of components are their own screens in their own right, and they can be viewed in the same home window. So we can see here, for example, we have perhaps a PC-based solution on looking at the visualization through a web browser, and we can see we have a screen window, perhaps around a machine performance or motor data, for example. And that screen window can be displayed on another device, for example, a comfort panel, and they're both the same screen window, they're both the same visualization, they're both updated and visualized at the same time in the same instance. So this gives us consistency between different types of machines or different HMI panels, and also, it's independent from the technology as well. So we can have this on the comfort panels or indeed on the web-based solution through the web browser. Okay, so you can see at the top here, it's supported on both the comfort panels and the PC stations. And again, we have a little demonstration of this as well. So if I can just hand you back to Andy.
Cheers, Sam. Now then, again, just to give you a little bit of an idea, when we put these screens together, to come way overview. Each one of these is a screen window. The key thing is that these are not just a graphical representation. What you'll find is that if I hover over these, or I move anything around, it actually affects directly what is in the window. Key thing with Unified is that if you're familiar with WinCC SCADA, so we're talking about sort of 7.x, you'll be familiar with the idea of loading screen windows. If you're coming more from an HMI background, probably not so much so. And the first thing you'll notice is if you're using, say, for argument's sake, a unified comfort panel, that the global template screen things just don't exist. The reason is that we don't really need them. We have no requirement for them anymore. In simple terms, what we have is we have an element that we drag onto the screen, which are these things here. And then what we do is we tell the software which screen we want to load in it. Now, I appreciate you won't be able to see all the different text that we have on it, but just so you understand how the engineering screen relates to the way the software is actually running in the browser, is if we take a look at the different layers that we have here, you'll notice now, again, I didn't generate these names, but I find them quite useful because we have a screen window content. Screen window content is basically everything in the middle of here. What we also have is navigation screen windows. And as you see, as I click through them, you'll see that there's one called submenu that runs on the top, bottom. We've got one at the top, one at the bottom, and one to either side. This to me is a footer, and these would be our headers. And what you'll see up there is we have a screen window header. The key to it is that we load into these the information that we require to display. So, looking back at our way that our software runs, is if I want to load into the application window this image, that's what I tell it to do. If I want to load in, say, for argument's sake, my animation or my faceplates, the bit that's changing is this bit in the middle. I'm not changing the bottom part, I'm not changing the top part, I'm not actually bringing in these screen windows from the side. And this is the key to it. All you need to do is load that in. It can be done statically. So to show you what I mean by that is if I just take, say, for argument's sake, I'll go to my sub-navigation, and we look at overview, and we look at the properties of overview, then what we'll see is that we're actually loading in effect. We are loading in the overview. And again, what you'll find is as we switch through these, we'll notice that we're loading in here different screen windows. So this is the way that the software works. This is the way that screen windows work. It's very different from an HMI perspective, if that's what you're used to. But But again, if you're coming from the SCADA department side of things, then it's more obvious. So again, that is in effect screen windows. Very straightforward. So back to Sam.
Thank you, Andy. Now the next feature is regarding faceplates. Now this isn't necessarily a brand new feature. You're probably used to using faceplates in our previous or other visualization packages. And of course, we have faceplates within WinCC Unified. So they're within both the unified comfort panels as well as the PC runtime. And they are consistent between the two. So we can create what we call our individual library templates, and of course connect those up to the dynamic process, and we can use them on either or the panel or the PC station. So the way it works is we have a pop-up window. So as you'd expect, pop-up window for example, here we have motor 1. So we have this faceplate connected to the motor 1 dynamic process. The pop-up window, as any other types of windows within the unified solution, we can drag these around, so we're not restricted to having the pop-up perhaps obscuring the view of something behind it. We can always move this along, or we could also change the setting to have it fixed in place as well. So you're free to do that. So similar concept to what you're already used to, but a few kind of functional enhancements that have come with the unified system. So we'll just hand you over to Andy, who'll give you a quick demonstration of the faceplate solution.
Cheers, Sam. Okay. Key things to remember about faceplates, in fact, one of the most critical things to remember, is they're probably not going to be where you expect to find them. So typically, we would expect to find, this is where typically now we will find them, under common data, right down at the bottom here, and we have unified faceplate types. Now, I've created one up front. It's actually being utilized on my screens. So if we look at the faceplate screens, again, very, very simple stuff. But this is a faceplate element. We all understand the reasons why we would use faceplates. The way that we'd engineer them is a little bit different inside of TIA Portal right now. So when we take a look at the faceplate elements, what we'd expect to see is in here we have an interface element, the interface element for the valve itself. So what we do is in here, this is an I/O field. The I/O field is going to be linked to these elements here. So this is what the real world will see. This is what we present to the real world. So say for argument's sake, we just have two input fields in here. We have a tag interface, we have an open and an actuation. In the older software package, what we would have had to do is create drag and drop links between this particular element and the outside world. It's a lot simpler to configure now. So to actually get it onto the screen, what we would normally do is we would create the faceplate element. We would go into the screen that we want to put it onto. So in this instance, we're going to put it onto our faceplate screen. And we could potentially go into here. We could find in here our faceplate container. We could drag it on into there and then identify which faceplate it was we were trying to use. Alternatively, what we can do now is we can just take it into there and we can drag it onto there, and that gives us another instance. So what we have is in this particular one now, you'll notice that we have an interface. My interface is tagged up, so I've tagged it up to some real tags. This one here, we don't have anything. So this is where our interface now exists. Again, what we could do, and what we've kept this demonstration very simple, but we could have this coming in a faceplate, coming into a pop-up, and what we could also do is we could have it, say for argument's sake, just get this out of the way, have it so that when we click on the valve item in this instance, it pops up the faceplate element to give us some information about the particular valve that we clicked on, and then what we could do is we could click on, say for argument's sake, a parameter or a setting inside of here, and we deploy another view, a details view. So the beauty about it now is that we can have a pop-up which is being designed around a faceplate element, which is in effect bringing up another faceplate element. And what we can do is we can decide exactly where it is we want these faceplate elements to appear on the screen. So the good thing about it is when we click on an object, it's not going to necessarily obscure that object. if it gives us information that we could work with. So that is faceplate. That's faceplating. And back to Sam.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. So we all know that diagnostics and alarms within TI Portal is, well, the best in market, basically, and WinCC Unified continues this approach. So with alarming with the WinCC Unified V16, we have the alarming system based on the IEC standard 62682, and this enables us to have immediate notification of any types of process states which are outside of normal parameters. We can get warnings or critical alarms, which enable us to react quickly to these types of states, and also ultimately give us a shorter downtime, so we're able to keep the operational efficiency of the machine as high as possible. So this is available on the PLC platform, the 1500, and also the HMIs in the PC stations. So the interconnectivity of the devices comes into play here. So you need to have, for example, a robust and reliable communications network, perhaps around Profinet, and this enables you to have this very diverse and interconnected alarming concept as we have here. So we also have an alarm control for the efficient handling of these alarms. So this is the same control within both the unified comfort panels as well as the PC stations. So we can see here visually, it's very clear to see the name of the alarm, the category of the alarm, depending on the type of color perhaps. We also have timestamps down to milliseconds. So we know what the state of the machine is, we know the types of errors that we're getting, and hopefully with the descriptive texts, we can understand the problems and fix them as soon as possible. We also have support for multilingual alarms as well. So this opens you up to perhaps an international market where you write your messages in the language which is native to you, or perhaps native to the commissioning engineers, and you'll also have the language which is native to the end user or the operators. Okay, so dependent on the system language configuration at the end, it will pick the language appropriate for that. This alarm window is freely configurable as well, so we can see here we've got some buttons for different types of orders and sorting, this type of thing. You can freely configure those, change them around, resize them, all the rest of it. Within the alarm controls, we can also select things like a time range, so we can see what types of alarms were occurring within a specified time. We can sort, filter, or indeed print these alarms as well. And of course, as like kind of any other alarm control, we can also hide, lock, and acknowledge the alarms as well. So Andy's going to give you a quick look at this alarm control and hopefully show you some generated alarms and how we can use these in the control.
Okay. As I mentioned before, what we've actually done is these screens were generated by the HMI template suite. So what you'll notice is I don't actually have a link across here to load a screen window in. What I've done is we've used the messaging window that appears up here. So this is just the same thing. Click on this button and it will load the alarm. It will load the alarm viewer. Now, the first thing to become obvious is the fact that some of these buttons are different sizes. And you'll notice particularly this one here, which is much larger than the rest. Now, the reason we've done this is just to demonstrate the fact that we can change these at will. We can move them around. There's about 24 buttons that you can utilize inside of here to change the views in order to change the information that's coming in. This one in particular, you'll notice this nice big funnel symbol. When you load in your alarm view, it won't look like that. It'll look like a crosshair. So what I've done is I prefer the look and feel of this. This is just, and this is where the scalable vector graphics come in. This is just an SVG that I've actually dragged in, and then I've changed in the front of here, the look and feel it, so that I now know what that button actually does. Important thing, you'll notice that I've got some alarms coming in the background here. What I've done is we actually have this little piece of software which is running here, which is worth knowing about. I'm going to talk about it later on when we look at the trending, but you'll notice that I've got some values that are coming in here and they're oscillating up and down, and some are created randomly. This is just a little bit of software excuse me, that you can download directly, and it's a tag simulator. So it means I don't have to use a PLC in order to test the functionality of my SCADA system. So we've got that running in the background, which is why you'll see these alarms are coming in and out and they're jumping around all over the place. So first things, as we've already mentioned, we have alarms, we have warnings. There are a number of categories of alarms that we can put on here that have been pre-created for us. I've just some simple ones, which is just an alarm and a warning. Now, you'll see the alarms come in. We can change the colors. It's a little bit confusing because we can't really, with things flashing in and out, we can't really work out what's going on. So one of the key things that we can do now is we actually have the ability, in effect, to be able to filter the alarms. So what I can do is I can go into here and I can just say, right, what I want to do is add in, based on one of these criteria, say, let's say the name of the alarm class is equal to, and inside of there, we can decide, just put some text. So all I need to say is, look, I'm only really interested in an alarm. Oh, just, sorry, alarms. And then we can add that in and we can apply it. And what it automatically does, you can see in the background now, it's filtered out the alarms. So we have alarm filtering. This can also be done. I've done this based upon this filter system here. There'd be nothing to stop you creating a button on here that said, only show me alarms, only show me warnings, and so on and so forth. In terms of the configuration, in terms of getting this working, another key thing as well is that we now have the ability to actually be able to tag alarms to individual bits. For those that are very familiar with our products, you're probably aware in the past we would have had to use a bit and a byte or a word. Now we can create an individual alarm based around a tag, which sometimes can make things a lot easier. What we can also do as well is we have the capability to be able to filter the alarms. So we can actually go into here. I'll just turn these off and reset the alarms. Again, because this is all based on web technologies, what we could also do, if we want to, we can zoom in and we can take a look around the screen so we can see in more detail what's going on. And again, what I've chosen to do, you'll notice down in the footer here, there's some figures coming in telling me that I've got 2 active alarms and an acknowledged alarm. What you can do is there's a lot of information that you can append to this footer down here as well. This is just telling me the number of alarms that I've got and also whether I'm connected to the database or not. But again, a lot of things that we can do inside our alarm screens now. The interesting thing, and I think Sam did point this out, is that this functionality is also available so that we can use this inside of comfort panels and also on our PC SCADA systems as well. So we've now got a very comprehensive offering when it comes to the alarm handling side of things. In terms of the alarms and how you go about configuring them, literally what I've done is I've put together some screens. So inside of here, we've got a messaging screen, and all you need to do is literally come into our toolbox down here, find our control elements, and we just drag the thing and then configure it, and then we're off and running. So it's very, very straightforward, very, very intuitive to get up and running with. So that is our alarm handling control. And back over to Sam.
That's great, thank you, Andy. Okay, so the next control which we want to show is what we call the trend control. So with this, we can view either online live data, track this on the trend control, visualize it as you can see here, or we can fetch back historical data and display it on the same trend control. It's freely configurable, so the colors of the lines, you can choose what they are. So for example, here we can see we've got some red and blue lines on there. We can also do other types of configuration regarding the background, the line form as well, which we'll show in the demonstration, and also the ability to select ranges, print like a hard copy of this, or indeed export out of the trend control into like a CSV format. We also have something called the trend companion, so it's a separate control, but it's kind of linked to the trend control. So we can see here it's available at the moment on the PC station, but in development for the comfort panels. And with the trend companion, we can do things like statistical evaluation of the processed data. So for example, here we can select a range of data, and then within that range we can see things such as the sum of values, the average of values. We can determine what the maximum and the minimum is, and of course more advanced features around perhaps the integral of this range as well. Again, we can print hard copies of this, or indeed export this statistical data outside of the unified environment. So, but kind of a SCADA type of solution, but available in the unified system. So, I've just hand you over to Andy, who can give you a quick demo of this with some live data.
Okay, so back to our little project. As we've already mentioned, I'm using the tag simulator. For those that are interested, what you can actually do is it's available as a free download. It's actually quite useful, as I said, if you don't have the PLC. So there you go, tag simulators for HMI. If anybody's interested, I mean, we can obviously play the video back, or we can send you the link to it. It's really quite useful, particularly if you don't have any hardware available to play around with. So back to our unified project. You can see that I've got some some data that's coming in. A few key things. This is the trend companion that we have running down the backside over here. Actually, in effect, these two are docked, they're linked together. The trend companion is designed for displaying, I think as Sam already pointed out, statistical information. So what I can decide to do is, I've got some various buttons I can play around with here. What I can do is I can first of all decide which information I want to display to run analytics on. I'm going to leave everything running. What I can also do as well, though, is you'll notice I've got a button here that's grayed out. And we'll come to that in a second. And I've got a button here which is this. Now, you'll notice when I click on this, it immediately stops the trend. It's still gathering information in the background, but it's just chosen, so right, this is the information I'm particularly interested in. What we've now got is I have two ruler elements that I can move around. And you'll notice that this information is being gathered live in here. So the first thing it's doing is, if I just pull that across, it's giving me things like, there we go, the highest values, time limits, etc., etc. What I also now, though, if we click on this button here, what it'll then do is it'll do a statistical analysis of the information that resides in between the two ruler elements. Now, what I've also done as well is by default, the ruler element comes up. But again, just to demonstrate how flexible the software package is and how easy it is to configure and what we can do with it, the power of it, what you'll notice is that just to make sure that I understand what I'm doing and what I'm looking at, the ruler element, which looks very similar to these two delimiters here, is now I've changed the color of the spine that runs down the bottom. I can change the length of it, I can change the format of it and the look of it. I've decided to change the color of it just to make it stand out away from the ruler element, and I've turned the ruler element off as well. But again, I can choose my range, click on the button, and then what it then does, it does a statistical analysis and displays the information down there. Again, the trend companion is completely configurable. So inside of there, I can decide on what information it is I want to display. And again, we can move it and then run another analysis of it. What we can then do is, I won't do it now, but I can clearly decide to export this information. I could have done the same thing from the trend up here. I just have chosen not to put, there's about 20 odd buttons that we can put on here. I've chosen to display some of the ones that I would probably use on a day-to-day basis and for the benefit of this demonstration. What you'll also get as well, you'll have noticed this little window up here. What this is designed for is you can change the order. This is basically gives you the ability to bring the trends up forward or move them to the back. It might be that if you have a trend which has backfill in it, you may not, for example, if the blue was backfilled and it was at the front, you may not be able to see the red trend or the green trend. So this thing gives you the ability to change the order in which they are overlaid one on top of each other. Again, in terms of configuration, it's really straightforward. We have a trend control and we have a trend companion. We drag them onto the screen and configure them in the normal way. What we do find is you've got a trend area down here, and the trend area itself, this is where you actually configure the information. This is where you tell it. This is where you select the data that you're interested in. And we then populate it with the trends with the tag accordingly. So very, very simple to configure and set up. So we're back over to Sam.
That's great, thank you, Andy. Now the topic around animations, so this is very powerful within WinCC Unified. So a traditional way to do animations may be to use things like graphics lists and incrementing through the graphics lists in order to sort of mimic a type of animation. Since we have the ability to program and configure things with JavaScript, we can actually control some of the object elements. So for example, the angle of an object, we can control that with JavaScript. So as you can imagine, if we can control that angle with JavaScript, we can have a counter which perhaps increments that angle and mimics or creates a rotating element. So the idea of having a spinning motor animation becomes perhaps a little bit more intuitive, a little bit easier than perhaps using graphics lists. We also have this feature as well, which you can see on screen, called custom web controllers. Now, this is a very powerful feature where we can actually have 2D or 3D animations, perhaps taken directly from a CAD package, and we can actually connect that to different tags. So for example, you may have position tags for an X, Y, Z axis on for an XY machine, and create, as I say, link those two tags and actually have the animation moving in real time. So it's a little, this web control, it's not necessarily straightforward. There is a little bit of engineering work provided, but it does look very good and it's a very powerful feature. Okay, so we do actually have an example of this based around a live machine in Germany, which is part of the production process for the PLCs, and we do have that connected to some tags, so it is fully animated. I think, Andy, we've got that ready to show.
Yep, we have some. So Sam's talked around about the custom controls. Now, what you will find is this is all being done obviously in real time. You'll notice that I've just simulated the tags and the movement of the position. This particular machine has, if you imagine, this object here is a little bit like a faceplate. It has an interface, it's an interface already generated that we've connected the tags to. I haven't created this. What you will then find is that we've got control over certain elements of the machine. It could be that we had digital inputs that we've used from, say, for example, the photocells that come across it. Potentially, we could even control a conveyor belt if we so wished. The key thing to it is that we've now got an interface whereby, and this is the benefit of going to something that is based around a browser-based technology, we can do some really clever things on the actual visualization front end. To get it working is, in tier, is straightforward, but you have to have the file in the first instance. So what you'll find is on the desktop, you'll notice, and this is where the user files comes in. So this is my project. Inside of the user files, you would create a folder called custom controls. Has to be called custom controls in that format. Inside of there, this is the object that has been created for us up front. Now, we didn't create this, but I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. Once you've dragged and dropped that into there, what it actually gives you in effect is when you actually start looking at your custom control, inside of here, what you'll notice is that we get another object. So inside of controls, there. So drilling machine appears in my controls once it has been dropped into that specific location inside of the project. At that point, all we need to do then is we drag drilling machine onto the screen. What we'll then find, I'll just zoom in so you can see what we've got. We've got a control, which I should have probably chosen a different color from gray. What you will then find is that that object has an interface, whether it be the camera. So you'll see there, we can actually, in effect, we can choose the angle at which we look at the object from. What we can also do as well, we haven't implemented that, but it's obviously something you can do. What we obviously then have, and you'll notice here, product progress and the offsets. So if I click on those, you'll notice I've tagged those up to some tag called drill offset. What we can then do, back to our screen, is we can obviously then manipulate it using these sliders. Additionally, what we can do is we can also as well, we can move it around. and we have active and passive camera views. So we can do some really clever stuff now inside of Unified, and this is one of the main, well, one of the benefits of moving to HTML and a web-based system. What we also have, again, just to sort of really finish off on this topic, and when I did this, it seemed like a really good idea at the time. Just demonstrate that as I start to move the slider, in effect, what it's doing is it's changing the position of angle of rotation. Then I realized it was incredibly difficult to control it, so I went to putting a separate slider in. But the key to it is that now we have the ability, you can see there, we're changing the rotation, the direction of rotation of this element here. And what we're also doing is I'm able to adjust the angle of the other slider element, which is a live object. Furthermore, not quite sure whether you'd ever use this in this context. Something we haven't really talked about is the fact that the unified panels are multi-touch. And also as well, one of the new features that we've got is gesture control. So I've just put a little bit of code in the back of here. It's nothing clever. What you will notice is, sorry about the clicking, but I have the ability to, on a gesture, in this instance, I've decided to change the position of my slider. Can't see the real application for that in real life, but you know, it just gives you a demonstration of what you can do with it and some of the benefits of it. So this is the gesture control that we would have dragged into doing that. So that could what probably really would be is you would probably use it to change screen, or maybe to increment a value or do something like that with it. But it gives you an idea of the sort of thing that you can now do with the animations inside of the software package. So back to Sam.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So hopefully you've seen some of the kind of the benefits of the new WinCC system, and if you're looking to actually perhaps purchase this in the form of the runtime for the PC station, these are some of the order numbers. So you can see here it's the WinCC Unified runtime. These numbers here are representative of the number of power tags. And ordered along with an IPC, we have these order numbers here. So if you do order this alongside an IPC, you tend to get a discount on that. Or indeed, if you want to use the HMI comfort panels, the actual physical hardware, we can see here we've got MTP, as Andy said earlier, multi-touch panel. The numbers here representative of the size in inches, so 7-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, so on and so forth. And we have the different variants here, so the order numbers for those. Also, if you wish to mount these as well, we have some mounting frames as well. So if you're going or moving from the existing the TP, the touch panel, TP 1500, to the unified comfort panels, the multi-touch panel, we have these frame sets to enable you to do that, orderable with these numbers here. So with that, hopefully you've seen the benefits of this unified platform, and also got some useful order numbers, so you can put your orders in with your representative sales guide today, and then get going with the WinCC Unified solution. With that, we thank you for your time, and if you've got any questions, then now's the time to do that. We're going to stop the recording, and yeah, feel free to ask your questions.